Thanks very much, Kevin, for that very kind introduction. Just had to do a double take to make sure you were talking about me there. I know we're on the graveyard shift at the moment, so I'm going to try my best to keep you all stimulated. So, as you can see from the title above, it's a mouthful. And the paper was written by myself, Dr. Alan Hoare, Professor Roger West, and Deborah Rowland. And essentially what this paper looks at is just a different way of doing business within the Irish public sector when it comes to our assets. And essentially what this paper is looking at is a part of my PhD research. And with any research question, you have to find a problem. So I had to see, was there a problem to begin with in the Irish public sector when it came to the core management of their assets. So this makes up part two of a significant survey I've done. The first one looked at BIM, and this one specifically looks at facilities management in the Irish construction industry. I think we all know that the current state the Irish construction industry is in. We face our 7th year of decline. On top of that, we're striving to make a deficit that's less than 3% GDP by 2015. And this is all on top of tough times. And one of the biggest initiatives that have come from the government in recent times is the 2.25 billion investment put into the public sector. But to operate within this, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we have to operate within current frameworks, with one of them being the CWMF, the Capital Works Management Framework. At present, it's contentious to say the least, and even though there's evidence that tenders are coming in lower, we're not too sure if we're actually getting value for money and if these public assets are being procured with a life cycle approach. There's also other current initiatives in, such as the Public Service Reform Plan, and one major, I suppose, disappointment with this plan is that there's no current asset register. This has already happened in England, where there's already been 120 million sterling saved. But as Minister Hayes said today, there is current initiatives in place to put a portfolio in action. So they seem to be addressing some of these problems in the least. As I said before, the purpose of this paper is to look at the current assets within the public sector and just to suggest a more robust methodology in assessing these and going forward. I took that slide off David Phillips. I love it. But I looked at this into 3 different sections, and the first one was the need for change to ensure a more efficient Irish public sector. And I looked at current initiatives in place as the National Energy Efficiency Plan. And what this says that Ireland had to achieve a 33% reduction, well, actually a 20% reduction, but they're challenging the public sector to ensure they make 33%. This is also on top of current initiatives by the European Parliament Building Directive that we had certain carbon emissions as well. In order for Ireland to have any chance of reaching these targets, what we need is a public sector that has enhanced physical environment to operate from, because this can directly impede work environment. What I suggest within this paper, obviously it being a BIM conference, to do with BIM and also facilities management, but it's not also just that, it's also a framework currently in place within the UK called a soft landings framework. I looked at these two, that's why Deborah is on this paper, and to see if this could be transferable to the Irish construction industry. So the second part of the literature review just examined a move towards a more efficient and intelligent Irish public sector state. And what essentially it just looked at what BIM for FM can do and some of the initiatives in place and why should we move towards such a current technology. And there's been a number of reports, especially when it comes to interoperability and the loss of documentation. It's done by the National Institute of Standards and Technology within the USA, where 15.8 billion can be saved by different project interoperability, in which FM and BIM are tied in along the lines. There's a number of advantages to BIM and FM. These include asset management, as this can link data in the FM BIM record model to a database of building assets. Space management and tracking, because using a BIM model for space management enables the facility team to analyse the existing use of space. Disaster planning. I actually had a chat with Finnit Janigan, and he was informing that there's technology now available where you can actually analyse the crack pattern in windows, and from there you're able to put an emergency response in place of exactly the crack pattern, when it's going to break and how to get people out. It's always evolving, and at the end of the day the whole purpose of BIM is to get a model which can be used at the end. With the figure is 20% the cost of construction, while 80% the cost of the life cycle. So up front, that's the whole FM for BIM, I think, is at the forefront now, and you need to be, it'd be foolish to be looking at any kind of BIM without looking towards FM. There's a number of FM initiatives going on in place, including Cookham Wood in the UK, the Texas A&H Health Centre, as well as the Sydney Opera House. So, sorry, I just flicked this on. So the next thing I looked at after having a look at this literature review is to look at the UK BIM policy. I think we all know by now, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But the overall purpose of introducing this was that the UK were finding that their built assets, they weren't working as what they were hoping. They weren't getting the efficiency out of them. So the whole reason working towards a level 2 BIM by 2016 is to have a more intelligent government in the state. So hence, this is where the UK BIM policy came in. However, what makes their policy unique, and when it comes to facilities management, is the soft landings framework, which is coming in the process. As Deborah Rowland puts it, a lot of people like to say it's soft landings framework wrapped around BIM, but she likes to strongly put out that it's BIM wrapped around a soft landings framework, that this is the process which will bring it on to the next level. So essentially it's to champion a better outcome for built assets during design and construction stages, powered by a BIM information model to ensure value is achieved in the operational life cycle of an asset. So essentially the purpose of this is that with anything when you buy it, you don't want to be left alone. This ensures that the contractor and the architect are heavily tied into the kind of building for 3 to 5 years to make sure that the FM is capable with the BIM model and it is able to bring it forth. As you can see here, there's a number of key things from it. One of them will be a key element of design and construction process, maintaining the golden thread of building purposes, early engagement of the end user, which is probably the most important thing, is bringing the FM onto the design team. Combined with BIM, it will provide a fully populated asset data set to feed into CAFM systems, as well as post-occupancy evaluation. And as you can see there on the side, the proposition, the diagram here, the purpose of this is that it shows that early decisions from the beginning of the construction life cycle can have important impact further back as we go on. This here now is just a measurement of the current GSL, and what we have here is energy management, which is essentially the measurement. This is how they're actually measuring it now at the moment. It's a measurement of energy post and pre, functionality and effectiveness, which is the operational, as well as environmental. So, I know that's a brief understanding there of exactly what the soft landing framework is, and what they're hoping to get out of it is collaborative working through the project lifecycle, ensure operation costs are maintained, that BIM can provide a fully populated data set into CAFM systems, and 3D modelling to assist with ongoing planning modifications. So essentially, there was a survey done which I tried to mirror with my own survey, which was done by the BIM for FM group, which aimed to target the majority of FM companies within the UK, and the results are fairly surprising, to say the least. 65% of respondents had heard of BIM, but what's perhaps more surprising, only 26% have already used it in a project. 23% are certain that the company was planning to use BIM in the near future. However, the vast majority were unsure of how organisations would use this technology. All through individually, people seem to have an understanding of what BIM and FM will entail. A number of the opportunities that came back from the survey was life cycle management was the top, better efficiency was number 2, and then better reporting. But with everything there's concerns, and some of the concerns within the UK at the moment when it comes to BIM and FM include how to populate, get the information into CAFM systems, and also the cost of the model, and who's going to update it, and who's going to be responsible for it. So these are all ongoing issues. So I brought this forward, and initially what I did with the survey was that it was piloted through the Irish Property Facilities Management Association to their database. And it was brought to their board of members, and their board of members essentially went through it, tore it apart and brought it back to me. And one of the biggest things was that it was too BIM orientated, even though this was mainly based around BIM. And the reason that they were worried about that is that BIM still hasn't gained the traction in the industry. So they wanted to make it as relevant as possible. So I took out a good bit to do with it. So early FM involvement specifically focused on what the FM can bring on early engagement within construction projects. FM and ICT, so this aimed to get an understanding of what ICTs are currently being used within the FM sector within Ireland. And then finally ICT as a tool for managing the Irish government estate. So what I was interested in seeing if there was any signs of ICT or BIM currently being used to manage any government assets at present. So the fourth part of the survey, essentially what I found was 11% of the respondents had routinely observed early FM involvement in the design and construction phase. 55% claimed that there was none to little involvement of the FM. Despite this, 61% believed that the FM was involved from an early stage, that they could play a major role in improving sustainable construction potential, as well as providing a new cost focus for buildings. There was also believed that the FM should have an advisory role within design and construction phases that can eliminate non-required items and advise on best fit for occupants, as well as enhancing accessibility from a maintenance point of view. But there was worries, and one of the main worries was, would the FM impact on the architect? Would he actually cause more harm to the design team? And essentially, were they actually skilled enough to play a role within the design team? So the second part, I looked at the ICT, what current ICT was in place within the FM sector in Ireland, and currently there's 79% of respondents still use paper-based or a digital copy CD or DVD, with only 1% using a web FM or O&M system. There was a number of companies that cited BMS and computer-aided facilities management as the main source of transferring information. One company within the survey were using a Revit model, and we believe this offers the opportunity to provide a model which is interoperable with FM tools such as CITA. 80% of respondents are very somewhat aware of the current interest and debate in respect to BIM. This is a lot higher than what's going on in the UK, according to this survey, but you're comparing with apples with oranges. There was 38 member responses compared, I'd say, to about 200 in the UK. 23% of that number have used BIM models for facility operations in existing buildings to ensure that utilities can be maintained or diverted when necessary. Also, despite the lack of uptake in BIM in regards to FM, there is signs that a number of responding companies have significant knowledge when it comes to ICT and improving the overall FM process. Some of these include CAFM systems, RIFT tags, augmented reality. There is a high level of technology from what I gather from the results within the FM sector. There is a move towards it, and there is positive signs that the Irish FM sector, though stagnating, is there ready to move on. The final part of the survey looked at current FM ICT in regards to the public sector. And what this found was that there was a total of 69% of respondents claimed that the Irish government should take a similar stance to the UK, and 22 respondents have worked within the public sector. And some of the biggest things they noticed was decisions based on short-term costs and lack of coordination between designers, contractors and operators. There was a suggestion that the FM, if introduced in a consultant role, can help the Irish government meet its carbon targets and high energy savings. Also, the FM manager can provide information about the buildings and the service within, but also occupiers' actions too, and a great extent they can influence actions to be more sustainable. So this brings us on to the overall findings. So overall, at present, there's little involvement of the FM during the early stages of construction. The FM should have an advisory role within design and construction phases, according to respondents. However, there's been little move towards cutting-edge technologies, despite a significant knowledge demonstrated when it comes to ICT and improving the overall FM process. And there's a strong call within the sector at the moment for the implementation of BIM on public sector projects. So it brings me to my conclusion. If we look at the UK and the FM sector, I don't think there's major differences. I think Ireland are set up, and I do believe a similar methodology could be used to help advance the Irish sector. This is part of my research. What I'm interested in what role a facilities management can play, and this has led into a the pilot project which I've been working on with the CITA team, and where I hope to monitor the FM involvement and hopefully map the interaction and the processes between the design team, and maybe come up with some process that can be used in conjunction with BIM to help bring the FM to a more business role, a more substantial role within an organisation, bring it out of the operational confinement more into the financial business section. So I put up a picture here of maybe what Ireland 2050 might look like. I seriously doubt it, but one is the dream. So finally, I believe that these technologies, along with early FM involvement, could help shape future assets, and that despite the low uptake of BIM, I do believe the FM sector is slightly positioned to kind of advance when it comes to this. Thanks for bearing with me. Cheers.
Barry, thank you for an excellent presentation. Have we any questions from the floor? Up the front here, please.
Thanks. Just a bit of a silly question, perhaps, but you said 69% of Irish professionals thought that Ireland should take a similar stance to the UK. I wonder what the other 21% thought.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Sorry, I apologise.
You said 69% of Irish professionals advocated Ireland taking a similar stance to the UK on BIM. I wondered about the other 21%. What did they think?
That's the bad thing about a survey, you know. I mean, it's very hard to tell, but as Laura was pointing out, there is the 10% that want to move on, and there's always a section that doesn't. So, you know, I mean, I still believe that, unfortunately, despite all the great work here done today, BIM is still in its infancy in Ireland. But with the likes of here today and people, you know, I think we're driving. And some of the results in that survey, you know, though, you know, I mean, it's only a very brief snapshot. There are positive signs, you know what I mean, and there is a want to move on anyway, and there is a few. So, as well as for the other 21%, I wouldn't like to be thinking what they're thinking.
Thanks for that.
No problem.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry.